Yes, absolutely. Well, we'll get into the crux of it, and the Olyroos squad, as mentioned, for the Under-23 Asian Cup has been announced. Tony Vidmar selecting his 23 players that will go to Qatar. Now, there are several notable absences, which we'll get onto a little bit later, but obviously the highlight is the exclusion of Adelaide's starboy Nestori Irankunda. Now, the initial reaction, online and on social media was one of understandable confusion and shock, you'd have to say. Jacob, despite the fact that he's only 18 years old, he would have been arguably the best player in an under 23 squad. Now, he hasn't been in an underage squad for a while, but I think the feeling was that it didn't really matter. It was no big deal until we got to a major tournament. Well, we're here now. It's a big one. It's an important one, and Nesta's not in the squad.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's understandable the reaction that came out when the squad was announced because I think off the back of the performances that we've seen from him, I mean, he's literally just scored a hat trick last week, and he's now not in the squad. It felt like a bit of a gut punch, I think, to a lot of people to go, here's the best young talent in the league in the country, and he's not in the side. But as I'm sure both of you will get into, there are reasons for and against his inclusion in this squad.
Yes, there are. Well, Christian, I know you and I are on opposite sides of this argument, so I'll let you have the first swing. What was your reaction to the news and the reasons granted for why he wasn't in the squad as well?
I mean, look, I don't totally disagree with people who are supporting, the decision to leave him out of the squad. I mean, there must be obviously something playing out in the background that maybe we're not 100% aware of. And I know his mentality has been raised, and obviously Vidmar mentioned, how he's been on a roller coaster emotionally. But I just think at the end of the day, we're leaving out what would have been the best player in the squad. And for me, that's just really worrying when the national team isn't taken as first priority as such. And that's how many people would view it, whether you think it's true or not, because what if he was at Bayern Munich, for example, and as of this moment, he was called up to the squad to face Arsenal in the Champions League? Would he be negotiating with the coaches to turn that opportunity down as well? Because even Kunda has to have had some say in this exclusion. So for me, if the focal point of the issue is the emotional, mental aspect, as well as looking after his future for long term, to protect him and whatnot, then I think it comes back to that argument I was having with you, Lockie, about him staying at the A League for another season. Get him to have another season under his belt where he's playing more consistently, growing as a player, both on and off the pitch, because I'm sort of just sick and tired of players like, Alessandro Ciccardi, Alex Robertson not receiving call-ups, whether it be for the Socceroos, the Olyroos, for different reasons.
Yeah, and you bring up a couple of other names there, which we will get onto. But I think the thing that we can all agree on is that, saying that he was snubbed or his talent was overlooked is completely missing the point, right? We've talked about the difficult season that he's had, all the pressure and expectation that's been put on him. Despite what people might think, this is not Vidmar and even potentially Graham Arnold forcing this outcome on Nesta, or at least it's a blanket statement that's been made with no consideration, right? I want to read out some quotes from Tony Vidmar. This is via Vince Rugari in the Sydney Morning Herald on Thursday, who Vidmar, by the way, has admitted it met with Nesta on several occasions in the last month. He said, "What's happened to him this season, I think he's on a roller coaster 24/7. That's just the way he is. We have to look at the bigger picture. He's going to be the future of the national team, that's for sure, and we just have to be mindful of what we do with him in the national team space. There's things we really can't discuss and talk about. The human being is number one. Playing for the national team is a huge thing, and I've spoken to him about that. He just wants to play football for his club and then get ready for the next part of his journey. Dealing with players and having that relationship with them, you find out so much more about him." Jacob, I feel like those quotes reveal a lot that's been missed today in the discourse online, is that Nesta has been involved in this decision. Now, obviously, he doesn't have the final say, but there's clearly been discussion there. And, this perspective is backed up by Irankunda himself. And I want to play a little clip. This is him speaking to 7 News on Tuesday night.
Obviously, I struggled with it throughout the season. Obviously, I'm getting a hold of it now, so they've had the belief in me throughout the season, even though I haven't played the best, which has kind of gave me my confidence again. So yeah, I'm really happy. Obviously, not selected for Olyroos, Socceroos. I haven't been in the best form, so don't blame the coaches. I blame myself. I know what I'm capable of.
So for me, Jacob, like he's talking about, the mentality aspect and everything. We've been talking about that all season, and so is Carl Viard and Stefan Walk, these guys at the club. That's been a persistent issue, and Irankunda is admitting that, and he's talking about not having blame for the coaches for not being picked in this squad. I just think there's a mutuality here that people are missing.
Yeah, it definitely helps the case when it's coming from the player himself that maybe he sort of blames himself slightly for the performances that he's put in, especially in that early part of the season where he was sort of misfiring, hadn't found his form, hadn't found his feet as a starter really, and sort of struggled to break into things. For him to be able to take that and shoulder that responsibility, I mean, he's the sort of player that has done that his whole career, at least from what we've seen from his time at Adelaide, in that he puts the weight of the world on his shoulders every time he goes out on that pitch. If he makes a mistake, if he doesn't contribute in the ways that he wants, he gets, visibly upset and disappointed. And, it's a blessing and a curse. It's a good thing because it makes him want to push to be the best player that he possibly can be, to contribute as much as possible. But then it's in cases like this where we've seen, I think, a bit of a maturity from him, rather than, lashing out and saying that, he's not been picked for whatever reasons. He's going, right, no, I have to own that potentially it's because I haven't put in the performances that are necessary. And I think that that's showing a real maturity there, in that he wants to continue to do what's best for himself. And if there is that mutuality, like you said, between him and the coaches, then that makes it, even better, because he won't then feel that he's not supported in this decision and in this, phase of his career where he's tasked with an absolutely massive jump ahead of him, right? Going over to Bayern, whatever that encompasses for him, whether that's playing for the academy, getting out on loan. We spoke about it in the last episode, what the options are going to be for him. Regardless of what it is, it's going to be a huge leap for him. So I think that he's probably looking ahead to that and thinking, how can I put myself in the right headspace for that? And it's probably just finishing off the season with the club, limiting the amount of pressure that he's putting on himself, and making sure that, he finishes the season strong and in good form.
And Christian, another argument I'm going to put to you is that the role of these underage teams is to develop players for the senior national team. And, you kind of just make the assumption that being a part of those teams is the best thing for players. And yes, 99% of the time it absolutely is. Perhaps there is an exception, though, where not being part of this squad for just one tournament, you got to remember he's 18 years old. He's still going to be eligible for the next cycle when it comes around. He's got so much time ahead of him, and one tournament, and probably the Olympics as well, if we qualify, 2 tournaments, in the really big scheme of things, will not have a huge impact.
Yeah, and again, I don't totally disagree with what you're saying. Even Jacob raised a good point about the mentality, and sort of maybe he's thinking it from a point, whereas maybe just let the season ride out. He hasn't been playing consistently as such this season. He doesn't want maybe too much pressure on himself for another major tournament. Maybe give him a bit of time. I understand all that, but you have to understand sort of the frustrations at the same time coming from other people saying, this is our national team at the end of the day. Like, we've been going on for years about how, in past, how Olyroos have failed to qualify for Olympics and etc. And, if we keep having cases like this, for example, where players opt not to play for the national team, whether it be Socceroos, Olyroos, or whatever the case may be, I think just that aspect is just a bit disappointing.
That's fair. Yeah, that's a good argument. And, I guess for the under 20,
it's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. And I guess for the under 23 as well, Jacob, the Olympic Games is that big thing, right? And I've just made the point about development, but because the senior men don't play in the Olympics, that is the pinnacle for underage football on the male side of things.
Yeah, and it's that chance as well to get exposure to international football, which when the Asian Cup was on, we spoke about differences between club football and international football ad nauseum, right? And how there's so many differences there, and it's a completely different environment. You're playing and training alongside people that you maybe haven't spent a huge amount of time with, and it's, sort of getting that experience under your belt that can be massive. And it is sort of I think what's taken people by surprise is that this is sort of a very rare situation when it comes to talented young players. I mean, you look over in Europe, I'll take England as an example, no bias there for any reason whatsoever, but with the likes of Jude Bellingham, when he was, first really breaking onto the scene as a youngster, there was never any discussion of leaving him out of any of the underage teams for any reason whatsoever. It's one of those things where it was, right, we've got this clearly very talented player who's going to be a core part of our senior team when he, hits his strides. Let's get him that exposure to international football early. So I'm sort of caught in between the two sides to this one, because you can see Nesta's talent and you can see how important it would be to be able to get embedded into international football and to sort of understand the expectations that are there. But then you can understand it from the players and coaches' sides, where if they've made that decision themselves, you don't want to be going against, the players' wishes.
And the other good examples to bring up, we saw Brazil play Spain in an all-age men's game a couple of weeks ago in the international break, and Endrick and Lamine Yamal, 17-year-old, 16-year-old, were on either sides of that game, and shone it up, didn't they, as well? So it is, I feel like it has to be a case-by-case basis. I'm by no means saying that Nesta should just never play for the national teams, but there perhaps could be moments. And Christian, we just over a month ago we interviewed Michael Zapponi on the show, and this is one of his responses to one of our questions about football discourse in Australia.
Sometimes I think I should get myself off X or Twitter, as it was known, because there's not a lot of positive commentary on there. But there's a lot of positive that happens in the game. So I think if we love the game, and we all do, and we all want it to be better, and we all can have very robust conversations about what we think we can do to make it better. But let's focus on the positives as well. Let's not always reflect on the negative side of things, and let's keep an open mind as to how we can improve.
So the question there is, what is the positive side to this story? And for me, we have this prodigal talent in Irankunda who's been through the ringer this season, and with the best of intentions for his future in mind, the coaching staff have made a decision that is designed to protect him. And is that the right decision? Who knows? We probably won't find out for a long time. But the intentions of the people that are actually close to him and have all the information, a lot of it that I'm sure we do not, who are actually making these decisions, their intentions appear to be pure. And is that not enough?
Yeah, you're
Christian?
right. Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, there could be a case down the line, for example, where a new coaching staff comes in. Maybe they don't take his priorities firsthand. They say, okay, you're talented. You're just going straight into the lineup. Your opinion sort of doesn't really matter. It's our decision at the end of the day. So, yeah, what you're saying is right. At least they've taken him from face value. Obviously, he's had a say in it, like we've said. And obviously, he's not emotionally 100% in it, ready to compete, which is, fair enough if that's his position. So, and also the other positive probably you can take out of this is, for Vidmar to leave Irankunda out of this squad, it probably shows just the amount of the talent and the depth pool in the Olyroos setup as it is, because if the talent pool was pretty low, or we were struggling to find some talent here and there, then maybe we would have had no choice but to pick Irankunda. But because we've got a lot of talented youngsters coming through, I think that's another positive that we can view from the system.